Hello and welcome to a presentation on concrete. Probably came here to learn a bit about concrete, so let's get started. So what is concrete? Concrete is basically three things put together. You have cement, which is actually a very small portion of concrete. The aggregate, which is filler, mostly gravel, crushed stone, sand, and water. The water is mostly there to activate the cement. Cement is actually just glue. It's not the actual concrete. Cement is not concrete. Understand this. Is a very small portion of actual construction. Within the concrete, you can have steel support. Steel support can range from wire mesh to rebar, wire mesh being the smallest, lightest form of support for concrete, but it's mostly there just to control cracks, and it's usually there for small projects such as pavement or maybe driveways and such. Rebar, also known as reinforcement bars, are thicker and used for major projects to give large concrete shape and form and support. And here you can see in a major construction site in a building, major steel beams and some rebar, as you can see, to give it shape and form and support. But not much wire mesh, if you notice. Cracks. Oh yes, there are a lot of kind of cracks. They can happen through weathering, human mistakes, mechanical errors. One kind is scaling. It's not an obvious kind of crack, but it's basically the concrete starting to peel off because of constantly freezing and thawing. Freezing and thawing in extreme weathers. Also, crazing happens for the same reason. Freezing and thawing over and over again. Starts to put large pressure on the concrete. Movement cracks is probably the most, you probably know this kind of cracks. When you see a tree coming out through concrete, these are the kind of cracks it does. It moves the concrete, it breaks it up. Plastic shrinkage. Plastic refers to the cement, because while it's wet, it's actually considered a plastic. But plastic shrinkage happens when in arid areas or in humid, when there's a lot of humidity and heat, it starts to dry up too quickly, and it starts to leave the cement to shrink on its own. Creeping happens, it's kind of like movement cracking, but it's more subtle. It usually leads to warping concrete, or just a separation of concrete, sliding of concrete, usually from applied forces that aren't, as immediate as, let's say, a tree. Rusting can also happen when the steel bars begin to rust. The chemical reaction will actually burst through the concrete, not burst actually, but it will start breaking through the concrete and deteriorating it. Blemishes are another kind of problem on concrete. It's not as obvious as a crack or as problematic, but it's kind of ugly. Sand streaks, for example. Now you may think, oh, it's rain decolorizing concrete, but it's actually when water dries, it brings up aggregate and sand to the surface of the concrete. And honeycombing is when it's the aggregate or the cement is not evenly distributed within the concrete, and so you get areas with insufficient cement or too much aggregate. Voids happen when there's when there's pockets of air or pockets of some other mineral or water that end up leaving behind these little bug holes. Deterioration happens when the concrete is not compacted well enough. It's just slapped on. Slopes happen on vertical concrete, usually walls, when they're up against plywood to keep them there in shape. And decoloration happens usually through inconsistencies when the workman is using more water in a section, or he's using different kinds of concrete, or maybe more aggregate and things like that. You should also understand surface finishes. There's all kinds of surface finishes, but here are the four most common ones. There's the non-slip finish, which is basically using a brush or a broom to give it a rough texture, to give it a non-slip surface. Troweling happens when they go over it with a machine or by hand to basically give it a design. It's almost like the non-slip finish, but prettier. You can see this in parking garages or in public spaces. Exposed aggregate, which is basically just aggregate in the surface, and you can see this downtown. You'll see the aggregate shining. It'll be like little pebbles and rocks that'll reflect light. It's very pretty. Stamping is basically just giving the illusion that it is not concrete. Basically making it look like bricks or maybe rocks. So yeah, that is my presentation on concrete. Now the more you know. A presentation by this guy, aka me. Thank you for listening.